The desert night in Beersheba was still as Jacob stood behind a small altar of stone. Behind him, wagons loaded with his family and all they owned waited in the dark. The journey ahead would take them out of the land God had promised and into Egypt, a place of power, famine relief, and uncertainty. Jacob lifted a sacrifice, and in the quiet, the voice of God broke through the night. Jacob, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. I will go with you, and I will bring you up again. Strengthened by God's assurance, the old patriarch turned towards the south. The family of Israel began moving toward the Nile Valley, where Joseph waited, where provision was waiting, and where God would begin turning a family into a nation. Welcome back to Remnant Teachings. In our study through Genesis, we've traced the covenant from Abraham to Isaac and through Jacob. And this has all taken place through a lot of conflict, famine, deception, forgiveness, and restoration. Today, we reach a monumental turning point in the story. The covenant will now shift locations. As the covenant family moves from the promised land of Canaan to the land of Goshen, where they create a massive, wonderful nation for God. Before Jacob moves his entire family to Egypt, he stops at a very familiar place. And we all may remember this. He stops at Beersheba. This is the same place that Abraham and Isaac both stopped. To build an altar and make sacrifice to God. Jacob is seeking a direction. This has to be extremely scary. For decades, he has lived in this land. And now all of a sudden, he's wanting to leave. And he calls on God to give him the direction. So Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. And Joseph's hands shall close your eyes. God is answering with reassurance. Don't be afraid. This is where I'm going to make you that great nation. And then God further says, I will go with you. And adding to the comfort, he says, and your son Joseph will close your eyes. Now, as they're on their way, so he has his reassurance. Jacob's feeling, he's probably a little apprehensive still, but he's like, all right, God said do this. Let's load up these wagons that the Pharaoh of Egypt sent for us. And they're on their way down. And Genesis 46, verses 8 through 27, we're not going to read that. But what this is a very important passage area because it goes through the lineage of all of the male sons. And we find that there is a total of 66. Now, this is important because when you go down and you get Joseph's family and put his family in, now you have 70. This is the sons, the grandchildren, and the future clan of Israel. All begins right here at this one point. Why is 70 so important, though? 7 is a number of completion. 70 is the completeness. And it also echoes the table of nations that we saw in Genesis 10, where it went through Noah's descendants. And we come down to Seth, where we start the righteousness back. Israel is now a microcosm of what God will ultimately do. He will bless all nations through Abraham's seed. This is not just genealogy. This is a snapshot of a nation in seed form. The seed has been planted. Now the fruit, the plants will prosper. See, but don't get confused. Don't get confused, guys, between Israel, the nation, Israel, the people, and Israel, the spiritual side. Don't necessarily get those confused. They overlap in the Bible, it seems, but they don't. They're three distinct entities. They all just happen to share the same name. But check out, I did a video that should have dropped just the other day. It's called What is Israel? Land, People, Promise. And this is going to give a little bit more clarification on what I've just said. That's not the important part to our lesson today. What is important is that God placed the nation and the people, the future nation, I should say, and the people of Israel in the most fertile land. He softened Pharaoh's heart here. And 400 years in the future, we're going to see where he hardens the Pharaoh's heart, all to show and teach his people. As this caravan's headed down south, they're traveling to Egypt. So Jacob says, Judah, go on down there and you let your brother know that we're coming. I don't want any surprises. I'm too old to deal with a bunch of bull. Get your brother on board and let's get ourselves situated, set up. Let's follow the Lord's instructions to the T. And I'm looking forward to seeing my son again. Joseph has got to be ecstatic right now. For 22 years, he's been away from his family, his father, let's say. He's seen his brother in the past few years. But his father, he has not seen him in 22 years. As a matter of fact, up until recently, his father thought he was dead. That wasn't the case, though. Joseph was preparing a land, a place for them. Joseph endeared himself to the Pharaoh so much that the Pharaoh was like, yeah, bring them on down. I want to keep you happy, Joseph, because our nation depends on you right now. We still have 3 years of this drought, and there's no one else qualified to get us through this. So Joseph, he's getting his chariot together. I'm sure he's putting on his best clothes because I'm sure that it means something to him that his father does see him in the position of power that he has. But I know that just for a moment, that 17-year-old boy that was going out to tell his brothers, Dad sent me out here to check on you. All of that had to come to his mind. For just a brief moment, he was the boy in Cloak of Many Colors. This happens to be one of the most emotional scenes in the Bible. I believe that I just, if you look at the literal translations to what we have today, it does not convey it. But what it says today is, then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on the ground a good while. Israel said to Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household, who were in the land of Canaan, have come to me. When they embrace, there in Hebrew, there's wording that suggests that this is more than just an embrace. But the Hebrew word that is used is vayevach, and I may not pronounce that quite correctly. I can't get it in my throat right, but vayevach is the word that is used. The root is Bāḳāh, if anyone else is looking at it, the Hebrew wording. What this means is to weep, cry lamently, and deeply. The Hebrew text goes a little further, though, and the whole thing, it's and he wept on his neck a long while, is what our translation says. And the literal translation over kind of the root of this word would be, and he wept or wept. But they add another symbol. In the Hebrew wording, they add another symbol, and it's kind of pronounced something like ud, like H-O-O-D, ud. But the important part of what I'm saying here is this means that not only was he weeping, but it was very emotional. It was going on for a long while. It's almost like that uncontrollable weeping. And I don't know if you've ever had that or if you've experienced that before, but you can't control yourself. You are in such emotion that all you can do is cry and weep. And you can say, "Oh, I'm not crying no more," but you can't help yourself. And that is what this was. I mean, a father and a son reunited after 22 years, both believing the other, one was like, I don't know if my dad's alive or not. And the other's, I know my son's dead. And in 22 years, they're together. There had to have been an immense amount of emotion. I can't emphasize that enough. The best way to describe this would be covenantal emotion. This isn't just casual tears. This is the breaking open of that 22 years. And then Jacob says, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know you are still alive." He's 130 years old. I'm sure lamenting for his son has kept him alive. He loved this boy that was taken from him, ripped apart by animals. I bet that was an interesting discussion between the brothers and their father. But for Jacob, this reunion, it was tangible proof that God's promise, it held firm, even across the years of sorrow. Joseph then instructs his brothers in how to speak to Pharaoh. When Pharaoh calls you and says, "What is your occupation?" you shall say, "Your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth even until now, both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians." Their identity as shepherds was despised by the Egyptians. We mentioned that before. The Egyptians were a class of people that had this feeling, if you weren't one of them, then they didn't even want to eat at the same table as you. Joseph was nationalized because of what he did. Although his heritage was Hebrew, Joseph was clearly an Egyptian by this time. So there comes the point now that Pharaoh, he needs to meet these new subjects. And Joseph takes 5 of his brothers, and they're presented before Pharaoh. And just as Jacob said, each one of them said, "Oh no, we herd the animals, we deal with livestock. We're essentially farmers. We are the lowest of the low in your kingdom." But the Pharaoh still wanting to keep Joseph in, I guess, good spirits as a great governor to the people of Egypt, which he was. I'm sure he was an immaculate governor. Then Pharaoh says to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen. And if you know any able men among them, put them in charge of my livestock." Then Joseph brought in Jacob, his father, and stood him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many are the days of the years of your life?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their sojourning." And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. Then Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a possession of the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. Pharaoh is giving a very warm welcome to Joseph's family. And he's also getting some of the best farmers to tend to his personal items. And this is going to come into play because the people, the Hebrews now that live there, that's part of their payment, is they have a job, so they get paid to do the job. They're living there because of Pharaoh's kindness. It's actually God's grace, but they're living there. And since shepherds were viewed as the lowest of the low, no one's going to bother them. They're not even going to walk over to see what they're doing. But before leaving, Jacob blesses Pharaoh. And this is very important because even the Pharaoh of Egypt, the narcissistic man that believes he is God or a God on earth, respects the authority of the God of Isaac, the God of Isaac, the God of Abraham, a deep respect for that God because of the blessings that the kingdom of Egypt has seen through Joseph. See, this is fulfilling earlier dreams that Joseph had. And Joseph is taking care of his family, and his family, of course, they have to bow to him because it's the custom. This is not a prideful thing. This is humility and service for everyone. Now, the drought, it is severe in the land. The people still have 3 years of drought to go. And at some point in the second year, people's money started to run out. See, Joseph collected all of this grain and these goods, and he put them in storage. And then he's selling it. So the people in Canaan have no more money. The residents of Egypt have no more money. And they come in the third year and they're like, man, we ain't got no money, man. We still need food. We still need food to eat. And Joseph says, well, I guess if you want to do some bartering, you have livestock. Bring some of your livestock and then we'll see if we can't work a trade. So people would bring their livestock, their cows, their goats, their sheep, whatever livestock they had. And in exchange for some of that livestock, Joseph would give the grain needed. In the course of a year, the people have totally exhausted their livestock resources. No more livestock. So we come to the the fourth year of the drought. People come in to Joseph. We don't have any money. We don't have any livestock. And Joseph sits back and he says, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. Now, I don't think they had kind of deeds the same way, but he says, the deed to your property, I'll take that. And for that deed, you can have food the whole year. So he takes the people's deeds. Now we're in the 5th and final year of one of the most severe droughts in the land. And the people's money is now gone. Their livestock is gone. And their land is gone. The Pharaoh owns all of this. I mean, right after the 2-year point, Joseph took every bit of the people's money from Canaan and Egypt and he presented it to Pharaoh. Pharaoh now owns all this. So what do the people have left to sell other than themselves? So Joseph buys their service for the Pharaoh. So these people have become more of indentured servants. And that's just kind of where we are at this point. But now, the priests of the area, they were second to Pharaoh on the hierarchy. They received a stipend or an allowance. So they didn't lose their possessions. What about the people over there in the land of Goshen? Who do you think was taking care of all that livestock that came in? Tending all those animals, assisting Joseph with whatever needed done. They were paid for that as well. God, even when other people are struggling, God provides for his people. And this final year of the drought is passing. And you're coming into the 6th year. You got a little bit of rain coming in, thunder and all that good stuff. And the people need to plant, but what are they going to plant? They go to Joseph and say, well, now what are you going to do there, Mr. Smarty Pants? You got everything we have. How are we going to buy seed to plant? Joseph had an answer for that too. He said, well, I'm going to take 20% of everything you grow and give it to Pharaoh. So he provided everyone with enough seed to plant their field size. And he said, so 20% of this comes back to Pharaoh. You keep the other 80%. You divide it up between food and next year's seed how you see fit. But ensure that that 20% makes it to Pharaoh. And up until the end of the Pharaoh's times, that was the custom, that the Pharaoh would receive 20% of whatever you grew, or I believe it also went into livestock and what you made, kind of like a kingdom tax. Sounds familiar to America today, tax everything. But during this time, the young nation of Israel, it's making a name for itself. I mean, the Pharaoh could not be more happy. Through Joseph, not only does he have all the money, all the land, and every person is essentially a slave, servant to Pharaoh. What more could a God on earth ask for? Joseph inflated this man's ego so much. And if you know narcissists, when you inflate that ego, they are your best friend. So as we're closing this little section here up of the moving of the nation of Israel, thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it, and were fruitful, and multiplied greatly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. And when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, If now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in the burying place, he answers. I will do as you have said. And he said, Swear to me. And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. As Egypt is collapsing under famine, Joseph administers a system that saves the nation from starvation and gives Pharaoh immense strength. You know, some might see this as harsh. Others would see this as wise administration under harsh times. We have some of that going on today, where we're going to have to hope that we have wise administration during these times. But regardless, the covenant message is clear. God's people thrive while the world struggles. Look around you today and see the people that are most concerned, the non-Christians. Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm not worried. I know that God has me and that God will take care of me. I know what happens to me once I die, and I'm comfortable. I'm happy to know that. The Lord gives me that comfort. You can know it too. Another important thing that we'll kind of come back to in 400 years or so, Jacob is adamant. I do not want to be buried in Egypt, where he's wanting to be buried. You remember way back in, it was either lesson 9 or 10, Abraham bought the cave of Machpelah. Yeah, that's where Jacob wants to go. That's where he's actually referring to when he says he wants to go back to the land, where the burying place. That's the cave that he wants his remains taken to. Jacob likely imagined that the covenant would be fulfilled in Canaan. God promised this land. Why wouldn't he fulfill this covenant here? Yet God brings fulfillment in a surprising location. He brings everyone, the entire clan, 66 counted people, he brings them down to the land of Goshen, such a small little nation, not a threat to anyone. And they get to live in the most prized place in all of Egypt, the land of Goshen. This is that fertile Nile Delta area that we've talked about in our history and the other and other times. Please keep all of that history in mind as we're closing out Genesis. There's no more new history for the Bronze Age I can present that's relevant. So we got to keep this all this in mind. And they're in this very lush, rich valley. I mean, it's dried and cracked and nothing at the moment. Give it a couple years. And not only did God put them in a land that they could flourish and multiply, He set the brother Joseph over them to protect them. And as we move through life, this entire story of Joseph teaches us one thing, that sometimes God sends us to places that we never planned to go to. He answers us in the area we never thought we'd go. He fulfills promises in lands that you couldn't even imagine living. But this again, Joseph, one more time, as we've discussed before, he's foreshadowing Christ. He's a beloved son who was rejected by his brothers. He is suffering, and then there's exaltation. And through one man's humility, many, many, many lives were saved. Joseph forgave his brothers the same as Christ will forgive you. We don't need to talk about that no more. We're gonna leave that under the floor. We're gonna cover it, and you might step over it, but it's no need to bring it up. It's not going anywhere, and it's not hurting anything. And he gives a place of refuge for God's people. There it was a land for us, the future to come. But just as Joseph prepared a place in Egypt, Christ prepares that place for you right now in the kingdom of God. And if you think Joseph's story is unique, there was a young Sudanese girl named Josephine Bāḳāh, and she was born in 1869. As a child, she was kidnapped by slave traders. She was torn from her family and carried far away from her homeland. Everything that was familiar to her was stripped away. She is now a sojourner, essentially, and she eventually ended up in Italy, of all places. And this is a land, she didn't even speak the language. She did not know the custom. The expression fish out of water would be the best way. But in that foreign land, it's a place that she never would have chosen, but it's a place that changed her forever. She was placed in the care of a kind Christian family, and she encountered believers who treated her with dignity. For the first time in her life, she was treated like a dignified person. And amazingly, they gave her the gospel. They presented her with the gospel. And she found faith, as I hope all of you do. And she found freedom. She found a family through Christ. And Josephine would later say, "If I had remained in my own country, I would never have become who I am today." See, God took her out of the land. He took her out of Canaan, and He put her into Goshen. And that's where she thrived. See, and what she meant was that God had fulfilled His promise in a place she never expected. Not in comfort, not in stability, but in a foreign land. Just like Jacob and his family. They found life. They found their initial wealth, all in the land of Egypt. See, and Josephine, she went on to become a symbol of hope, forgiveness, and transformation. And her story is still told across the world today. This is a story I didn't even have to look up, because there's so few of these, but they're there. You see where God pulls people into special places. And all of this happened because God led her to a place she never would have gone on her own. We'll see later that there's even prophets that say, "I'm not going where you tell me, God," and He'll find a way to swallow them up and get them there. Father, thank You for being the God who goes with us into every unfamiliar place. Just as You met Jacob and Josephine in the night and comforted their fears, meet us in the places where the path is unclear. Teach us that Your promises are not limited by geography, circumstances, or expectations. Where You lead, You also provide. Where You send, You also sustain. May we trust You in the unexpected places. May we follow you even when the journey looks different than we imagined. And may we rest in the assurance that Christ, our greater Joseph, has gone before us, preparing the way. In Christ's name, amen. Guys, it's starting to rain here, but join us next week. We'll be doing, I believe, chapter 48, and I think we have 2 more lessons in Genesis, and then we're going to close that out. But until then, guys, walk in covenant, walk in grace, and walk as part of the remnant.
If these teachings bless you and you feel led to give, your support helps us share God's Word freely. Scan the QR code to partner with us in this ministry. Thank you, and God bless.